possibly, but be careful.
Should you buy a home service business in 2025? That's the year we're in. That's the question we're asking. The reason we're asking this question is, I mean, there's a lot of different reasons. I think we could do a whole episode just on why we're asking that question. But at the end of the day, this is an area that Ryan and I look at like more
Daily.
closely than any other. We're looking at deals in home service all week, every week, all the time. And it's something that I already have some business interests in. I want to add more business interest. The reason is because these are recession resistant businesses that they can still succeed if we are moving into a recession. And I think there's good reason to say maybe we are. And so we're going to be unpacking that question a little bit tonight, and also just talking about like, what does the market look like for them right now? How easy is it to get one? How do you find one? How do you get one? We're going to look at one deal as well in the home service category and actually unpack whether we think this is a good deal or not, and hopefully give you a little bit of an idea of how to look at these deals if you're looking at one for yourself.
Yeah, I mean, I think, kind of that intro here, just kind of us coming in like right out the gate. We were talking about this a lot pre-show and pretty much throughout the day. The market is kind of crazy right now. I think we have normally, if you've been following the show, we have lists of, it was almost half the episode was almost us trying to pick which one we wanted to review. And, across all the sites that we've looked at, all the broker stuff, it's getting harder and harder to find not only deals in general, but even just deals that make sense, especially as a new investor. So, one of the things that we kind of are touching on is, given the climate of everything, what's going on? Is it, in the beginning of 2025, we could find, 10, 20 HVAC companies on any biz buy sell listing. And then we did an episode on BBF MLS where we're like, okay, there's a few. And now we're looking. I don't even think we saw one in the last pass through.
No, and I think there's a lot of different reasons why that could be. I mean, we could speculate all day, and I think we will here.
Mm-hmm.
One of my biggest speculation points is I think that more people are just getting interested in home services and are trying to buy into these companies because they just think that they could be a safer investment of their time and money in an economy like this. So I think a lot of these are just getting snatched up quicker, or they're getting snatched up quicker when they do hit listing sites, which is what you can just see online. Or I think that they're getting snatched up quicker behind closed doors, meaning like some of the deals that we work on that are like off-market deals where the business is not listing themselves online for sale, but they're just talking to their friends, their family, their network, other competitors potentially that could be a purchaser of their business. They're talking to them and finding a deal there. And I think more and more of that is happening because people just see that the home services space is just a good one right now.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are, looking more towards trades as careers too. So there's a lot more people who could potentially be hired, and also a lot of people who could potentially be starting their own businesses. And not to say that there's this big bad private equity bubble, but I watched a video recently. I don't remember the YouTube channel, but the quote was that, or the statistic was that there are now more private equity firms than there are McDonald's in the U.S., which is crazy.
That's crazy.
Build more McDonald's is what I thought. So I think with a lot of these people buying, not that they're buying all of them up, but a lot are getting bought up. A lot of people are coming into the space, and a lot of sellers, I think, are. I think some sellers, to a degree, are either taking their listings off because they don't want to get barraged with offers. Maybe they don't need to sell, or they're sticking to their principles and they're saying, I'm only selling to the person that I want to sell to. And they're becoming much bigger sticklers for what they will. And I think when you see that sticker shock, it's a tactic. I think sticker shock is something they're using to push away people who are looking for, a cheap deal, to try and find people who are willing to, maybe they are willing to come down 100, 200K, but if you're not going to do the process and be, forthright with it, they're not going to accept it.
Yeah, I think that could be part of it. I think, the biggest thing I think it's important for us to take a look at here tonight is like when you're looking at investing in a home service business or buying a home service business, like what is your goal? Is your goal do you already have one that you're trying to add this on to? Are you trying to become a first-time entrepreneur? Are you trying to get into the space a little bit as an existing entrepreneur that just wants to like get into home service for the first time? I think the biggest thing I would want to take a look at in these situations is like, what is your growth plan and what are you going to do if you do buy one of these businesses? I think that's the biggest question you should ask yourself if you're considering this is like, do you have some kind of advantage that you're bringing to the table? Because if you pay, let's say you look at a business cash flowing $300,000 a year and you pay, let's say, a 2 times multiple on it, $600,000, you're taking a bet that you either like you're okay with just getting your money back in 2 years and then starting to make profit, or you're making a bet that you can grow it more quickly than that and recoup your money more quickly than 2 years and then start to make a profit. So that's kind of like the bet that you're making. When you make a big bet like that, like the thing that I would be thinking is, what are you going to bring to the table as either an owner or an operator, depending on how you're planning on running it? What are you going to bring to the table that's going to help you get that return or grow the business to shorten that time cycle?
Yeah, especially on a business of that size. I mean, obviously we talk about loans and SBA and how there's a 10-year ramp. So, you're paying back $600K at between 10 and 12% over 10 years, possibly. Ideally, you can pay it off earlier, within the penalty limits, but I won't get too deep into the finance stuff, which also something I learned the other day about SBA, side tangent here. You better have, like with a house, you better have those closing costs set aside, because you may be paying there's a percentage on top of every amount past $1 million that you have to pay on. So even though you may be like, $1 million, $100,000, or it's 1.25, you got to pay a percentage on that 250,000 over it. There's going to come out as closing costs. So factor that in.
SBA loan.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah. The closing costs are big.
Yeah. So you got to be, that 10%, not just the only thing you're going to need. So you're going to need to make sure you have those cash reserves to hold on to that. But
part of the closing costs, depending on the situation, I think they structure into the deal, but that does change the economics of the deal, right? Because if let's say it's $1 million loan and it's $200,000 a year in cash flow that it's going to be paying, as an example, that it's probably not a great example because that sounds like an overpriced business. But let's say, for the sake of example, you math it out that you're going to be able to cover your debt service and make some profit on top of that. But you didn't plan for the closing costs, and the closing costs are like another 10%. So it's like $1.1 million that the entire loan is for. That means your monthly debt service cost is higher than you planned for. So it changes the structure of the deal, and the deal might not pan out still.
And also note, if you're using a good SBA lender, they will stop you and be like, nah, it's not going to work, because there are percentages they need to see a business cash flow, especially service-based ones. So you probably wouldn't get to that point with the SBA, but if you're doing conventional loan, which, if you were just saying, I want to take $1 million loan, and it was a more kind of loose, stringent one, they're not going to help you with that. They're just going to make sure you can cover it, and they're just going to give it to you. So before you start playing with that money, make sure you have your ducks in a row. But back to the kind of the point about, the market and where it is, I think we're seeing a lot of people pulling the trigger on purchasing and a lot of people pulling out of the market due to lowballing. I think it's kind of following a real estate trajectory. But I think with like we've talked about with a number of guests, the surge of popularity in them, the boring business push, the inflapreneur push, I think is what they're called too. I think a lot of these guys are probably exhausted, and then a lot of people with more money are coming in and sweeping them up because they've been doing that for years now. And the market's gotten real quiet until the next big boom. I mean, the silver tsunami has, as they call it, has certainly come down to a more of a small kind of tide. It's the only things left are businesses that I've seen that are very niche, and you have to be passionate about a very particular end of the service business, which is the one we have today to show you.
Yeah, and one thing I'll add to that right before we dive into this business example is Ryan mentioned the silver tsunami there. One thing that I've observed just in my personal experience, because Brian and I, we're both young guys. Like we're both under 35. I'm under 30.
Brag about it.
He's right about it. Yep. Not giving our exact ages. We'll leave a little mystery to the table. But we're young guys. And so when we talk to a business owner that's 50, 55, 60, 65 years old, there's a part of them that looks at us and says, okay, this is just a young guy. Like, what can he do for my business? Right. And I think you can only have so much influence over someone that's way outside of your age range. And I think part of what's happening with the silver tsunami is that they're just seeing there's a lot of these young guys, young girls wanting to come in, take over my business. And I don't know. Grant said, you got little comment that I'll add here. Grant Barnes said, you guys aren't 60. I guess we look 60.
Well, you do this enough, and you will, yeah.
Yeah. I do have some grays on the side.
Oh, boo-hoo.
But I think these guys look at us as young people, young guys or girls that are interested in their business, and they just I think there's a gap of like struggling to understand like how would you run my business, and like the way that we see a growth plan for a business in 2025 versus the way that someone who's been running it for a while sees it. There's just a big gap there, and I think that's part of the transition of the silver tsunami that people didn't really account for and didn't really expect.
No, certainly not. The kind of perception of a younger person coming in, rightly so, that they may not know what they're doing is correct. And quite frankly, what we found a lot is that you have to kind of show where you can be useful and either bring in or adapt to the person that you're working with to kind of learn the business. Retail is obviously going to be a lot of a smaller hurdle to get into than a trade. But if you have the people around you with the knowledge that can help you along the way, you can certainly strengthen your position when talking to somebody older than you. Of like, I have all this coming with me to help maintain what you have and grow it. This is where my appeal comes in. So there are ways to kind of push through that.
Yeah, certainly. I think, like, to your point, track record is a very important part of that. And just what are you bringing to the table? How likely can I expect it to be as this like older guy or girl running a business? How likely can I expect it to be that I can transition this off to you and you can run it properly? Mm-hmm. So with that being said, let's dive into a little bit of an example here. Bring us back to our roots here, what we're all here for, some deal analysis. Also have another example or another comment here. Maybe the real private equity was the friends we made along the way. I like that comment a lot. I'm going to leave that one up for the remainder of the show unless we have another one. Good stuff, Grant.
Back-to-back bangers from Grant tonight.
Yeah, that was really good stuff.
Yeah, this is just it's super niche. Like I'm oh God. I mean, I'm trying to form a sentence here. Let's go here and here, but I'm like
about this business.
I believe you, but like you got to really want to sell blinds. And how many times are people buying blinds?
Blinds are important. I mean, people want to control their light distribution. Started in 2018.
Okay.
The business brought in 37 million in revenue and 300,000 in cash flow over the last 12 months. It serves a few exclusive zip codes in and around Disney, Winter Garden, and Claremont. So yeah, upscale areas.
Also, a lot of construction with Claremont, constant building and builders. So that is
could be.
There's only so much that you can build, though.
So I'm seeing a lot of language in here that makes me think this is a franchise, and then I'm saying, yep, franchises. So this looks like it's an established franchise. They keep using the word territory. Yeah, prime territory and room to grow. Darn
it, they got us again.
And that's okay, though. I mean, we've been looking into franchises a little bit more the last couple months, and I think it just depends on what the structure is. One of the very interesting things about buying an established franchise, though, is the franchise startup fees have already been paid. So you're not necessarily paying these like extra exorbitant fees to get the thing started. That you're just paying for a business, and potentially one that's really tightly well run with the structures that come with it. So I'll be the first to say I've changed my opinion on that a little bit. Let's get down to the multiple here. It's cash flowing about 300. They're asking about 939. The first questions I would be asking here are, they mentioned what the sales and cash flow were over the last 12 months. I would want to know, what did the 12 months before that and the 12 months before that look like?
Yeah.
Was it this like hockey stick growth all of a sudden, or have they been pretty steady with that, with those numbers over the last few years?
It's certainly something that you have to kind of, I mean, with a franchise, normally you'll have a standardized method of accounting, so you'll be pretty easy to see where they're spending, what they're getting in, because it's all got to come back to the mothership at some point. So normally financials for franchises, at least established ones, are fairly easy to come by and they're pretty clear, so you can get a good idea and there's not a lot of cooking the books or, creative accounting. So at least when you look into these, normally the financials are going to be pretty cut and dry and you're going to know what you're doing. And if they're allowing them to sell for this price, that means that they've already been pre-approved by the franchise to sell. So a lot of stuff to be liked here, and you can use SBA for franchise purchases as well.
It may mean that they've been approved by the franchise. Here's the one thing you might have to contend with. The smarter franchises have a first right of refusal. So if you're a buyer of something like this, and let's say you make an offer for the 939 that they're looking for, and the home office has first right of refusal for that territory, that might mean you make an offer, you're all excited as the potential buyer, and then all of a sudden the home office says, well, we get first rights of refusal to buy it for that, so we'll just buy it for the 939. So that's something that you do have to contend with. You might just get scooped out of nowhere. But one of the bigger red flags I see in here, down buried deep in the description, is the current owners work about 55 hours a week combined. But the structure's already in place for a new owner to step in smoothly.
Well, I said, I mean,
so this is, I mean, it's like, it's hidden in the language there, but if you read between the lines, what does that actually mean? That means that you're buying a job here. And when I thought something like that, it needs to be discounted properly. So I would want to understand, how are they calculating that cash flow? Usually, like, you take the net profit and you add back things that wouldn't be expenses under new ownership. But if one of the add backs that they're giving is that they're adding back the salary that's going to one of or both of the owners that are working 55 hours a week, that's no joke. They're working an average of 27 and a half hours a week in the business. I mean, that's more than half of a full-time job. It's closer to like 3/4 of a full-time job. So they're working a lot to make this happen, to make that cash flow. If part of that 300 is an added back owner salary, then I don't buy that it's 300. It's not 300, because to run that under new ownership, either you have to take that job and not pay yourself for that, or you're conflating the cash flow with salary, or you have to replace those owner salaries with another position that you have to pay money for and reduce the cash flow. So like, that's what I would be trying to unpack here and figure out, like, is that 300 a legitimate 300 that would be 300 under new ownership, or does it realistically end up being more like 220 after you make the necessary hire or hires to replace the owners?
Yeah, it's always a weird one with SDE, because you don't get the whole picture until you get into the back of the financials.
And it gets very subjective.
Yeah, I mean, for some people, buying a job is much more appealing to them because they don't mind it. They're like, yeah, I want to work and I want to do something, but at least let me get paid what I feel like would be appropriate. And somebody's like, oh, window treatments, 55 hours, $300,000. Yeah, it's appropriate. So it doesn't. There's no shame in the game if somebody wants to say, buy this and work in it and say, oh, well, every 55 hours that I put in gives me 55 hours a week equals $300K a year. A lot of people be happy with that.
A lot of people would. And there's absolutely no shame in the game of being an owner operator. I don't want to send that impression. What I'm saying is, you should not pay double for the owner operator portion. So you shouldn't, like, if the business requires someone to work in that position, then you shouldn't pay over a 3 times multiple on the, let's be conservative and say it's 60,000 that, like, you need to pay yourself to work that position. That's salary, and then there's cash flow, your profit. two different things. If you have to pay yourself 60 grand to work this like 55 hours a week, or 70 grand to work this 55 hours a week to make that up, that's not cash flow. It's a salary. They're two different things. So like, while it's a great job, like you should not have to pay a multiple on something that is actually salary.
I can agree with that, but I also think, there's, the other side of the case is going to be, well, if I give you 300K and you give me 900 in 3 years, you've technically, quote, broken even. So I think that's where people tend to get the numbers.
Who buys a business wanting to break even in 3 years?
Well, nobody, obviously, but I'm saying, you're free of that. I mean, if you bought a car and you had a 3-year lease on the car, different examples, but like, the car is expensive. It's obviously something you don't put out cash for, but if you paid it off in 3 years, you're pretty happy. Your car's paid off. It's no longer a debt, and everything after that goes right back into your pocket. So the assessment of the business, I think, is definitely in a franchise situation. I don't know the owners really got too much say in this. I feel like it's probably the office saying, you're going to sell for this much. Here's what you can put out in the market. Here's what you can accept. Because at the end of the day, like you said, they probably have first right of refusal. If they're doing these numbers, they're probably a very premium brand. And I'm sure they very smartly set up their franchise system. So
I would say different, actually, because the home office, is not going to want to boost that price because they get first right of refusal. So it's actually to their benefit that the sellers of this business try to sell it for as little as possible, because the franchise fees typically, like, I guess it depends on the structure.
Mm-hmm.
They're probably not going to see equity on the sale of the business if it sells to someone other than them. But because they get that first right of refusal, if they list this business for 700,000 rather than 939, that means that the franchise home office can say, "Oh, first right of refusal, we'll take it for the 700." Versus if they list it for 939, they're paying 239,000 more for the location.
I get you. Well, I'm going to give this one a solid C. It's a weird industry. I think that the franchise system definitely works for certain types of stuff. It's not, in this one, not my cup of tea of industry, but I think that for the amount of hours, which A+ for transparency, overall C, I think that you're definitely going to have up and down years, especially if, people are tightening their budgets and real estate is kind of down. You're going to feel it more heavily in this business. So I'm going to give it a C, where if you're in the right market and it's the right time, this thing could take off, but otherwise might not be a good bet overall.
Here's something interesting. Ryan and I obviously disagreed with a lot of different parts of this deal, but I agree with the C, actually. I was going to give it a C as well. One of the things we didn't get to cover is the FF&E.
Mm-hmm.
There is 40 grand there. If that's a legit 40 grand, that's
I would imagine
that's something that should be factored in. The other thing I'll say is, in this case, so a couple things. One, I actually like the niche. I don't know of a ton of window treatment companies, and I'm sure there's a lot of competition out there for these, because it sounds like it's probably it sounds like a fairly high margin business. 300 on 1.365, not bad. So I'm sure there's a lot of competition out there, but I just haven't heard a lot about it. So it's like, it's probably not that high of competition. So I like that it's a little bit more niche. I like that it's in a good high-end luxury area. I actually really like that it's an established franchise here too, because to me, that says, like, you could probably step in and have, like, even if the sellers just say, "See ya, we took our paycheck, we don't want any more involvement," you could probably step in and get some decent help from the home office and have some systems and some processes to work off of. Like, you're just a lot more likely with a business this small, this size of business, you're a lot more likely to have some SOPs and some processes to work off of if it's part of a larger brand than if it was just an individual one-off business.
Yeah.
But I think it's hella overpriced. That's the other part of it. That's why I gave it a C.
Yeah. I mean, also franchises, you will have to do some sort of mandatory training boot camp kind of thing, not like physical boot camp, but like a week or 2 week long, like thing where you go and learn everything about the company. So you will be substantially trained beyond just what you're getting from the owner or franchise system, from what I learned.
That's part of what makes this one appealing for sure. But yeah, I would give it a C.
Yeah. Boy, what a weird episode when the best thing we can find is a window treatment, not even an HVAC or electrical. Like, that's what a weird market we're in right now.
Just not a lot of home service businesses being listed out there. So if you're someone who's looking for a home service business to buy, I mean, I think this is a call that you need to start looking off market. There's just not going to be a lot of opportunities on these listing sites. And for the ones that are out there, like there's just going to be more eyes on them, more competition. So you're probably going to overpay. So be looking in your network, be trying to generate off-market opportunities. And if you are trying to generate those off-market opportunities to buy businesses, we actually just released an internship program for Scale for Sale. Haven't even gotten to fill in Ryan on the full details of this yet. But we just released an internship program for Scale for Sale, where you can actually work hands in hand with us throughout the week and try to work towards doing some kind of equity deal, whether it's a minority deal, a majority deal, something you're doing with us or on your own. You can actually work alongside us to do that through this program now. So find Ryan or I on LinkedIn and just message us if you have questions about that. And in the meantime, we'll see you on the next episode.
See ya.